Managing complexity in the integration of demand response and energy efficiency. A few housekeeping notes we'd like to mention. For best results in viewing this presentation, we recommend using a wired high-speed internet connection, as wireless connections can be unpredictable. If you cannot get adequate sound from your computer speakers, you may dial into the audio portion using the telephone number listed in the right-hand panel of your interface under the audio section. Following the presentation, we'll have a brief question and answer period. You may submit your questions at any time using the interface on your screen. Happy to turn the floor over to our host and first speaker, Steve Hambrick, VP Strategic Sales and Operations at Converge. Steve, welcome to the event. You have the floor.
Thanks, PJ. I wanted to quickly introduce myself. I think I have one of the more confusing titles. But the way it applies to what we're talking about today is I oversee corporate strategy, which includes our solution strategy and how we deliver our products, but also how we get those to market, both through the regulatory channel, sales operations, sales engineering, and strategic sales. So it's fun to see the full life cycle, especially as these new EE and DR programs come out. So I'm happy to be with you today to follow up on the discussion we had a few months ago. So I'm going to let Steve Gore introduce himself later when I hand it over to him. Depending on when you registered, you may have noticed we had Paul Reitz, the lead product developer at Duke Energy. He is one of the speakers on the call. Unfortunately, he had an unavoidable conflict arise, so instead of Paul speaking, specifically to Duke's combined EE and DR programs, we'll be weaving in some best practices and lessons learned from a broader range of Converge clients. All right, so next slide, please. So for the agenda, I'm going to do a quick refresh of what we talked about last time, but with some new content. So it won't be the same content, but we're going to reiterate why integrating EE and DR is such a compelling opportunity, both to clients and the grid and customers. And then I'm going to hand it over to Steve, who's going to start talking about some of the challenges that we need to overcome to achieve the potential of EE and DR. Then we'll wrap it up with conclusions and questions. So again, why would you be interested in this topic? What we're seeing in the market is utilities, in particular maybe in the Northeast, that have a lot of regulatory incentives to invest in EE but haven't done residential or small commercial DR, but are starting to see its value as a capacity resource. How could we add DR to those programs? Or maybe you're in the Southeast and you've invested in DR, but you're looking to attract more participants or potentially even subsidize the cost effectiveness of your DR program with EE. Or maybe you just want to prevent your customers and your DR assets from being disintermediated by third-party devices. There's a lot of reasons why this topic could be interesting. And we're going to hit on all those. But there's one critical issue I wanted to hit before we dive into the content. As we're seeing more and more DR being an important operational resource for utilities, in particular if you're going to defer a transmission investment or a generation investment or expose yourself to the capacity markets and potential penalties. When you're looking at combined EE and DR solutions, you really need a DR expert as a partner to get this right. It's a much more targeted and specific outcome. So that's why one of the things we always say around here is you're better off buying your EE from a DR vendor than your DR from an EE vendor. So without further ado, let's jump into the content. Next. So two of the very obvious benefits are maximizing cost effectiveness and reducing customer confusion. From a cost effectiveness perspective, it's fantastic when you can, through the same recruitment, same truck roll, and same piece of hardware, layer in an additional benefit of energy efficiency or demand response, or even a demand response option. It's a pretty powerful component because you're doing very little to drive an increase in cost. So that's why you see the TRCs, this is an example from one of our accounts in Maryland, go up dramatically. And then from a cost perspective, not only do we see the value side increasing, we're also seeing the cost of Wi-Fi devices drop, which improves the cost effectiveness even more. And with Bring Your Own Device, there's other channels for devices to make their way into homes with even lower installed costs. So we're seeing compelling cost effectiveness, and we expect that to continue. On the customer confusion standpoint, you can see there's 5 programs here on the signpost, and you know, all of these outcomes can be delivered under one umbrella. You know, with a Wi-Fi thermostat delivering customer engagement, measurable and substantial efficiency, and high quality DR, all these can be combined into one program. And I think I used the analogy last time that you know, George Carlin said, to misquote him, thinking about how disinterested in energy the average person is, then you got to realize 50% of the people care even less than that. So let's make it easy for customers to engage. We know that the average energy consumer is getting more interested, but by offering a clear, non-confusing, and a much more compelling value proposition, we're going to pull that customer and get them engaged even more. The final benefit here is that as we move in that BYOD path on the customer confusion side, we can also prevent customer disintermediation. Next, please. So when we look at combined EEDR and engagement, I'm talking about thermostats. The future is more than thermostats, and we're expanding our scope beyond that. But right now, the low-hanging fruit and the most compelling solution is the thermostat. So we see 3 main values here. Under the engagement, it's about serving your customers by giving them a comfort and convenience of a mobile app that they're willing to go out and pay $250 for. So the customers have proven that they will proactively go out and purchase this. So offering this is very valuable to them. And that comes with personalized, actionable recommendations. And we're seeing what's happening inside the home through the two-way device, even without AMI data. So we're able to deliver a really compelling, unparalleled customer experience. And from an efficiency savings, you know, saving 10% of HVAC use, typically 4 to 6% of household use, this has a real meaningful bill impact for the customer. And then finally, we're delivering the utility high-quality DR. So because we've got two-way devices over a high-speed connection, we can deliver really predictable, responsive, the highest quality demand response, and pay the customer for giving us that. So it's even a better total value proposition for homeowners. Next, please. So I talked about high-quality demand response. When we think about the capacity markets, there's rules for valuing demand response, and those are that it's a predictable and reliable resource. It's responsive. You can target it by location, device type, rate type, substation, etc. That we can deliver customized load shapes or load durations, and that it has a long enough proven measure life that you can use it as a resource to defer capital investments in your grid. So these are tried and true criteria, and one of the things that we think is really important to highlight is that when you compare it to dynamic pricing without a device or behavioral demand response, there's really no comparison when you look at the value of a direct load control demand response. And this is a point I really want to hit home, because there's some misconception equating the value of the cost of different megawatts, but the value of those megawatts can be very, very different. And the flexibility and predictability of high quality DR is important today, but it's going to be even more important tomorrow as we have more renewables, as markets start to look at non-transmission alternatives and other creative applications for demand response. So in today's world, there's a stark difference in the quality and value of these megawatts, but in the future, that's going to be even more critical. 2 more points I want to make is, one, while dynamic pricing without a device has some limitations, with the device, it's an extremely powerful tool. Steve Gore is going to talk more about some of the programs we're working with device-enabled price response later, but it's a powerful tool both for protecting the customer from price spikes and bill shock and protecting the utility financially, as well as having a predictable operational resource, because we can predict how those devices will respond to a price signal. And then the other point I wanted to make is around the scale benefit of direct load control devices. From a household perspective, we're delivering a kilowatt per more, oftentimes much more than a kilowatt. And this is something that can reach the 70% of homes that don't have AMI. So from a scale perspective and the total volume of megawatts available, devices have a really compelling value proposition. Next, please. So the heterogeneous world. I use that word. I've been told I use that word way too much. But as we're looking at demand-side management programs and as utilities and regulators are looking at DERs, not just EE or DR, it's a really fluid landscape with rising expectations across the board. So we've got solutions that are innovating from just a thermostat or a switch to now pool pumps, water heaters, EVs, solar, storage, with a diverse ecosystem of suppliers and a constantly changing set of suppliers. Consumers also have rising expectations on how they want to integrate with technology and interact with energy, how seamless and easy they want it to be. Communication standards are also changing and evolving constantly. And finally, from a regulatory perspective, we have increasing EE and DR goals and other regulatory expectations. So we've got this, it's a heterogeneous world, but it's also a very fluid world. And I think this is important to highlight because utility IT departments don't typically have the staff and the resources to maintain a technology that can evolve and meld with this fluid landscape, because this isn't the kind of problem that can be solved by a kind of a heroic Big Bang deployment of technology. This is something that requires a constant set of evolving bilateral integrations and partnerships and an evolving set of customer-facing tools to make this, to help these demand-side management resources meet their full potential. So that's why my unbiased recommendation is when you think about a solution for this world, looking at a partner like Converge can be a really powerful asset, because we are building out all these connection points and evaluating these solutions and technologies and working with them. So by having a vendor and partner do that, we can bring a lot of this to bear for the utility without having the utility have to maintain these relationships on their own. And that's something we're hearing loud and clear from the market, that once utilities get past a couple of initial BYOD, bring your own device pilots, it's very taxing for them. Next, please. Another point I wanted to make was on scale. There's been some misleading statements in the market that devices can only reach 5% of households, and that's not true, and it's been proven time and time again. With the right incentives and the right funding levels, we can reach greater than 50% of the best load in the service territory. And I've got a couple examples here, and these aren't pilot results. This is 400,000 devices and over 300 megawatts of capacity just at PHI alone. So I want to highlight that through devices you can reach the best megawatts and a very high percentage of the service territory. And the flip side of that is currently bring your own device programs are going to struggle to achieve more than a 1 to 2% market penetration. And we hope that improves. We're investing heavily in bring your own device, and it's something that's critical to Converge's strategy going forward. But we're also realist and realize the constraints of the market. And if you need a lot of megawatts quickly in a constrained area, it's still going to be important to recruit customers and roll a truck. But in doing so, that doesn't mean you have to just install one type of device. You can offer customers a choice of a switch or a, on a water heater or HVAC or a different type of thermostat through different manufacturers. There's still optionality that can be offered, including in the program and cycling strategy. So turnkey doesn't have to be one size fits all, but to drive real meaningful scale, like we're seeing from some of these load pockets and other non-wires alternative projects, rolling a truck is still an important option to have. Next slide. So this is a busy slide. I'm trying to condense all of Praveen's marketing, Praveen Baggett, our VP of program marketing, all his wizardry into one slide. So forgive me for being busy. But these are some best practices, though, as you're rolling out an integrated EE and DR program for how you can achieve the desired market penetration cost effectively. The first one, augment versus initiate. Do you have an existing EE or DR program that you could augment with an additional offer? So let's say you've got a direct install thermostat program. Could we offer an additional DR feature onto that, and ultimately sunset the EE only program, or give EE programs a DR option? There's a way to evolve what you have without making it too confusing and build off the success the utility has already had. The second one, offer complexity. Depending on the complexity of the offer, we want to make sure that we do advanced targeting with our marketing to avoid customer confusion. So if the program requires a central HVAC, we want to be careful and make sure that we target likely central AC households, or explicitly state those constraints in program literature. And that's to avoid customer confusion and potential frustration. The customer centricity, and I think on that last point too, we want to make sure we qualify customers as early in the funnel as possible, at the call center or on the online application, et cetera. So we'll try to screen and then we'll qualify. Customer centricity, our point here is make sure you understand how your customer perceives and values the incentives. So as you have greater incentives, both for potentially a free device or a professionally installed device, or bill savings from efficiency, or payments for participating in a DR program, those are all going to be viewed in the pro column, and then you're going to have a set of perceived costs, both the if there's any consumer contribution to the device, or any other perceived costs in terms of maybe being there for an appointment, et cetera. So we've got to understand that balance of accounts on the consumer's perspective and make sure that the balance is attractive enough to get to the market penetration we want. Transparency, I think this is something where what the market is telling us is there's a lot of reasons why customers participate in these programs: bill savings, comfort, convenience, capacity payments, or DR incentive payments, doing the right thing for the environment, doing the right thing for their neighbors. You need to focus our marketing on those that are most critical to your demographic and most beneficial to your program goals, not try to be everything to anybody. It's everything to everybody. And the final one is on the marketing mix. I've hit on a lot of this. We want to segment our customers using analytics to get target the right customers through the right channels, and we want to offer them choices in terms of program design, cycling strategy, incentives, device types, device manufacturers. There's a lot of levers you can pull in baking choice into one of these programs. A key is to do it in a way that isn't overly confusing. All right, well, now I'm going to turn it over to Steve Gore to talk about some of the challenges we need to overcome to be successful.
Thanks, Steve Hambrick. My name is Steve Gore. I'm a director in Converge's product management organization, which hopefully is a little bit clearer of a title than Steve Hambrick. My role is to help identify the features, functionalities, and needs within our services, software, and hardware offerings. So I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the challenges and complexities when implementing these combined EE-DR programs, especially as we layer in additional trends within the industry. So we'll talk about bring your own device, small commercial, dynamic pricing, and then I'll pass it back over to Steve Hambrick to talk about M&V processes. Next slide, please. So let's start with the convergence of EE, DR, and bring your own device. For I think some very obvious reasons, many utilities are looking at including a BYOD model in their existing or upcoming programs. That model helps to reduce deployment costs while simultaneously increasing the program footprint and offering customers additional choices in the devices and their manners of participating in these programs. It's a natural fit and offers a number of benefits to utilities and to consumers. But there are some additional questions and complexities that we need to consider when we look at adding BYOD. Next slide, please. So one piece is just the business processes surrounding incorporating bring your own device resources. As an example, how do we manage the new enrollment and unenrollment processes? You can see two examples on your screen. On the left is a utility-centric approach to the enrollment process. This is a utility website that someone comes to enroll. It offers a uniform experience across all of the different customers, utilizes some standard lower effort integrations with the BYOD vendors, and helps the utility maintain control of all of their customer data. But it has some challenges. How do we drive customers to that utility enrollment website, especially if they already have a BYOD app or portal that they're using? So on the right, we have an example of a bring your own device vendor enrollment experience. This offers a different experience for different utility customers, but within the same bring your own device vendor, it offers a more integrated, more seamless enrollment experience into a utility program. The cost of that more seamless integration is a non-standard, higher effort integration that needs to be undertaken between the utility and their BYOD partners. It also involves more exchange of utility customer data and the privacy and security concerns that comes along with that. So this is an example of questions that we need to ask for the enrollment process. Similar questions come up for the unenrollment process. How do we manage the case where someone has taken their device to their summer home in Aspen, Colorado, and left the utility territory? How do we handle the customer service process? So if someone has a problem with enrolling, do they call the utility? Do they call their bring your own device manufacturer? Do they call the store that they bought the thermostat in? Do they call their HVAC contractor who installed it? So as we look to bring in BYOD devices into EE and DR programs, these are some of the questions that we need to be considering from a business process standpoint. Next slide, please. From a DR perspective, we know that utilities want predictable and reliable megawatts. And we also know that with a variety of different types of bring your own device resources, we'll get a variety of different types of control implementations. That may be a straight cycling control, an advanced cycling control, temperature setback, pre-cool, and probably other types of controls that I haven't mentioned. And with each different bring your own device vendor, we may find different restrictions that that vendor places on how we utilize their customers. They may define restrictions along the length of events, the number and frequency of events, and they may even charge a specific per event cost. So how do we combine this multitude of different options with a utility's desire for a simple, predictable, reliable megawatt? I think that's where we need a system that doesn't simply instruct other systems to dispatch their load, but a system that a utility can use that can understand and forecast what each different type and each individual bring your own device resource can provide, and then determine the best way to dispatch all of those different devices within their capabilities, within their restrictions, to provide that quality megawatt to a utility. Another interesting interplay between energy efficiency and demand response is how energy efficiency can reduce the amount of demand response that is available. So if I have a very efficient program on my thermostat for while I'm at work until 6:30 at night, and a utility calls a demand response event from 2 until 5, I may have little to no demand response potential that I can contribute. So it's important that we have systems that can understand that interplay and forecast that interplay. But more important is that we correctly define and file our programs so that we can receive credit for both that EE savings and the DR savings, even when they interact and change each other. Next slide, please. So looking now more at the EE side of things, how do we get EE savings as a utility with a bring your own device? Customer has gone out and purchased that device, maybe with a stipend or rebate from a utility, but on their own volition, they've installed a programmable thermostat. So what additional things can we offer that customer to increase their energy efficiency and increase our savings? Here is a hypothetical utility portal, something that we've worked with our customers to design and begin implementations on. And you can see a number of components. So we have control of the thermostat. We have targeted energy efficiency tips. We have usage comparisons. There's some gamification aspects. There's some ties into other utility systems to manage bills and report outages and request services. So I think the question as we integrate EE, DR, and bring your own device is, does this portal for the utility also control the bring your own device thermostat? If it does, how do we get customers from their existing bring your own device portal into the utility portal? How do we get them over that inertia of finding a new application, downloading it, creating a new login, and learning this new tool? And why would someone want to make that decision to come to this portal and use a different tool for controlling their thermostat? Alternatively, if this utility portal doesn't control the bring your own device resource, how do we get some of these additional EE measures in front of our customers? Do our BYOD partners need to incorporate some of this functionality into their portal so that we can push energy efficiency tips or give them a link to manage their bill in the Bring Your Own Device portal that a customer is already used to using. Last question as we bring EE, DR, and Bring Your Own Device together, how do we measure the impact of EE in this situation? And Steve Hambrick is going to talk more about the M&V approaches to energy efficiency in just a few minutes. Next slide, please. So we've talked about adding Bring Your Own Device to our EE and DR programs. Let's talk about incorporating small businesses into an EE-DR program. Small businesses are generally recognized as a segment that is underserved by our industry and a segment that has low customer satisfaction scores. So an EE and DR program is an excellent opportunity to engage with these customers. We can offer them a DR incentive, we can offer them EE savings, and we can offer them tools to quickly and easily manage their energy choices, even if they aren't physically at that location. But again, as we add in small business to our EE and DR program, there's some additional questions and complexities to consider. Next slide, please. So there's a reason that small business has traditionally been an underserved area for this industry. And they are a complex group to successfully engage with. And in order to do so successfully, we need to look not just at the technologies that we're offering them, but we need to look holistically at the processes we use to engage them, the people that we use to implement those processes, and the technology that supports them. So for example, we need to look at higher touch marketing processes that emphasize face-to-face sales rather than a more traditional direct mail approach. We need to make sure that we have trained our sales and support organizations to understand the goals and motivations of our small business customers. Lastly, we need to make sure that we have technology that supports multiple cycling options to maintain customer comfort, that provide distinct device and connectivity options that fit within their tenant and landlord agreements, and then provide enrollment and control features for businesses with multiple locations rather than a more traditional single-family home for residential customers. Next slide, please. So in addition to Bring Your Own Device and small business, another component that we can layer on to an EE and demand response program is a price response component. Technology-enabled pricing programs have proven to be very successful, both for utilities and for customers when they're implemented correctly. Customers are able to save money by automating their response to price signals while becoming more engaged and better informed about their energy choices. Utilities are able to get measurable and predictable load drop and protection from swings in the cost to serve their customers. And when we have existing EE and DR programs and assets in place, we can layer on a pricing program without rolling a truck, and that applies whether those assets are directly installed by a utility or Bring Your Own Device. Again, it's a natural fit to expand EE and DR programs to include pricing, but as we expand, there are some additional complexity and questions we need to address. Next slide, please. One example of that type of question is, how do we handle differences in price response? So with a direct load control program, we're generally willing to accept some differences in how devices respond. We'll accept devices that provide cycling versus adaptive cycling versus temperature setback. But we need to understand if it is fair to our customers and if it is permitted by our regulators to offer devices that respond differently to the same price signal to different customers. And if it isn't fair, and we're looking for a more uniform approach to price response for all of our customers, we need to understand if our approach to that is to make smart thermostats even smarter, and for them to understand all of the different types of pricing programs that are out there, whether those are residential demand charges, critical peak programs, peak time rebate, time of use, time variant pricing, real-time pricing. I think the list goes on and on and on. If we're doing this with a bring your own device model, then do we need all of our vendor portals to also learn and know about those different types of models and implement those pricing responses within their system? Or is this something that the price response component is built into the utility web portal, and that communicates with the direct install and bring your own device thermostats, and really devices that are out there. Pricing certainly isn't limited to thermostats. And if that's the case, is it a tool and a feature that drives customers into that utility portal? And how does that work and synchronize with a standalone bring your own device portal that may not know about these different pricing systems? So these are just a number of the types of questions that utilities need to be asking themselves as they're looking at these programs, and DR and EE vendors need to be working to identify solutions with their customers. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Steve Hambrick to talk through M&V.
Thanks, Steve Gore. I appreciate you giving me the driest topic of the day to end on. But I'll make it quick so we can get to questions. On the DR side, there's multiple ways, depending on the environment, that we can use to measure capacity benefit. The most tried and true is random sampling, so putting about 100 to 200 sites randomly into the population, depending on the size of the program, with high-frequency data logging, typically less than 5-minute intervals. So this works with monthly meter data and one-way paging switches. This works for everything. With AMI data, if it's 15 minutes or less, we can calculate individual household baselines and calculate load drop on a premise level. And then finally, probably the newest method is and I want to give a careful caveat that if the device is professionally installed and they note the demand of the appliance it's being installed on, we can use two-way device data, runtime data, to develop individual baselines for the appliance in question. So, and that's the newest way, and maybe it doesn't have universal approval from the various ISOs, but those are three methods that we can get DR savings. The EE side is more complicated for thermostats and other appliances. So if we're going to measure the behavioral savings of a smart communicating thermostat, the gold standard is to set up a randomized control trial with a treatment and control group. The challenge with this is to do the most refutably accurate and valid comparison group in the control, that we need to either do a recruit and delay or recruit and deny tactic. And both of those means that we're going to recruit a customer who wants to be in a program, and we're going to either delay or deny their ability to be in that program. So that creates some multiple issues with utility programs, as you can imagine. So, but that's not to say it's the only method. Different states, different evaluators have a different perspective on how we could evaluate savings for these new communicating programmable thermostats. So so it doesn't mean we have to go with the recruit and delay or recruit and deny, but that is the kind of the gold standard in the industry. But as we're going to talk about in the conclusions, always check your local conditions and evaluators and find the solution that's right for you. Okay, I'm going to jump to the conclusion slide, and then we'll wrap up with questions. So we spoke about the powerful combination of EE and DR. I think everyone on the call gets that. That's why we're here. But combining these programs adds complexity. DR is a much different outcome than EE, and getting both of these approved in the same program can be a much more complicated endeavor. So we believe strongly that an experienced vendor can help utilities navigate this complexity and set themselves up for program success. And then the final point, which I just alluded to, is the one size doesn't fit all. So we're all aware that there's different weather, demographic, regional, regulatory differences that will make utilities want and need different programs. But I want to reiterate that you can have different program designs while still using off-the-shelf third-party devices or software. That by using the best-of-breed technology that's out there, both on the device and software side, you can have a solution set that's really future-proof and can evolve as the landscape evolves, versus doing some kind of a customized effort that's going to get more and more rigid with time. So while one size doesn't fit all, it doesn't mean we need to go with a full custom solution. I'm sure a lot of people on the call can relate to that. So now we're going to turn it over to Q&A, and I've got a few questions teed up here. I'm going to start with a couple. Someone asked about, do you need AMI for these programs? You do not, and that's one of the really powerful advantages of high-speed two-way devices, is that we can do demand response, unlike behavioral demand response or deviceless price response. We can do this for the 70% of households without AMI. But having that AMI data does provide us some tools for better customer engagement. So we like to have AMI if it's there, but it's certainly not a requirement. A related follow-up, someone asked about, does a Nest thermostat have to integrate with AMI? And that is not a requirement. The Nest operates through the homeowner's Wi-Fi like most of the other smart devices, and is a great addition to these programs without AMI. Another question was around, what's the ideal incentive to drive participation? And this is a tricky question, because when we think about incentive, you have, on one level, you have the device type. Is it a thermostat, or is it a switch, or is it something else? Who makes the device? Is it professionally installed? How do I market that? How do I get this device and program in front of a customer? That's an important, maybe not typically thought as an incentive, but incredibly important to driving adoption. It has to be thought collectively with the device and the program offer. And then the program is going to typically include an upfront incentive and some kind of a recurring incentive for customers to allow their load to be cycled. So we really look at all those in combination. And for really extreme penetrations, trying to get to 50% or more of a demographic within a short time period, need to offer choice and extreme on all accounts. So we want to, if you need to get to 50% of a target demographic in 24 months, we're going to need to offer a switch and attractive thermostats. We're going to want to hit all the viable marketing channels. We're going to want a compelling upfront incentive, maybe even up to $100 enrollment incentive on top of the professional install. Again, this is for really driving extreme adoption if you're trying to avoid a transmission bottleneck or building a substation. And then an attractive recurring incentive of maybe $50 a year. That's the extreme across all four axes, but for a very compelling load pocket where you're trying to defer a major capital investment, that would be extreme but successful program design. Steve, I wanted to toss two over to you. The first one was about the results of device-enabled price response programs.
Just as far as what are some of the results that we're seeing there?
Right, maybe from some of our clients in terms of customer satisfaction and load drop.
Sure. So we have TOU and CPP programs that are enabled with both thermostats and load control switches, two-way communicating devices at multiple IOUs. And those IOUs have seen tremendous success with those programs. You know, tens of thousands of participants. The participants have a greater than 95% customer satisfaction score, and we're seeing reliable 2 to 3 kilowatt drops per household when we run the critical events for those utilities.
All right, thank you. And Steve, do you also mind, there was a question about international programs and Brazil in particular.
Sure. So I think, you know, Converge is very open to working in international markets. In fact, we already have programs in South Africa and Japan. Just as there's not one size that fits all utilities here in the U.S. and North America, the same is very true internationally. And so when we're looking at programs in other countries, we need to look at different types of HVAC systems that are popular in those areas. We need to look at different cultural influences, both from a marketing, a recruitment, and a participation perspective. So, you know, there are certainly more complexities that we see when we look at these international projects, but it's something we're very excited about, and especially if it's Brazil when the Olympics are happening. Call me.
Thanks. I'm going to field a couple more here. Someone asked about what kind of degradation we see in our device performance, and I'd like to answer that two ways. One is, you know, what percentages of the devices are typically offline? And there is kind of an ongoing, and it's something we factor into our capacity factor on a per household basis, but there's going to be some percentage of the devices that lose the connection either to a paging network or a two-way Wi-Fi or cellular or other channel. And so we institute a regimen to identify those devices and get them back online, kind of re-recruit them into the program. So that's something that happens over time. It's typically small, less than 5%. In terms of the actual devices themselves degrading, you know, it's one of the things we've got over 30 years of track time in this space, and we have devices from more than 25 years ago that are still working great. Utilities typically count on a 10 to 15 year measure life with no degradation of performance, but often these devices will last longer than that. It really is a proven, reliable, persistent resource. Someone asked another question about if a homeowner is to invest $250 into a device, how quickly they could recoup that investment. That really, I hate to say it really depends, but it really does depend on the weather, the size of the home and the HVAC system and how they use the device. But you typically would expect to see, these are just round numbers, you know, $100 a year in bill savings plus whatever DR incentives that customer can recruit. So I think you could very conservatively see most homes that would invest in a $250 thermostat being able to pay that back within 2 years. But again, there's a lot of variety there, but round numbers, that's probably good enough. Someone asked about the infamous California duck curve. There's certainly a way that these two-way devices and DR and DERs can contribute to mitigating that. Price response with flexible load resources could be a really compelling way to shift load into the back of the duct while dropping load as the solar resources get offline into the evening. So the more responsible and predictable, and the more you can integrate these resources with price signals, which we can, the better positioned you are to mitigate the duct curve. There was a question about our go-to-market strategy in terms of how we get devices in the field, and that one really varies. We always partner with our utilities to design a program for identifying and enrolling customers, and if we're installing devices, getting those installations completed. So sometimes we collaborate on the program design, sometimes it's full turnkey, and we design and deliver lots of flavors in between. So there's basically any conceivable model can work. And they had a follow-up question about the marketing channels of how we reach out to customers, and that's again kind of everything, including the kitchen sink, where we can do direct mail or bill inserts. We can coordinate with other installers or other program activity. Direct phone, email, even in some extreme cases, in small commercial, door-to-door. Everything is in play. We just try to find the right mix for our utility partner and their need. I think I have time for a final question on pay for performance. Someone asked if Converge will do pay for performance demand-side management programs, and that is absolutely something that we embrace. We're willing to stand behind our work and either put up our own capital or have incentives or revenue based upon the capacity benefits and efficiency benefits we provide. So I think I'm being told to wrap this up. We'll try to answer our any questions we didn't get through by email after this is over.
Thanks, Steve. Great presentation for both speakers. For our audience, we hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. As you log off, please take a moment to complete our survey and give us your feedback so we can continue to provide you with quality content. Thank you for attending, and this does conclude today's presentation.